You just get frustrated. You're just like, dude, I told you I didn't want to talk about this.
Dude, I never get frustrated. Are you kidding me? No, I'm just I'm always like Mr. Cool, calm, collective. I'm like, sure, honey, what do you want to talk about?
Yes. Yeah, there's times that like I might come to you and say like, hey, like I'm having this issue in my department and, you know, what do you think about this? And you're like, there's no way that I have like the brain space to even talk to you about this.
I don't disagree. I think we've had to get better at that. Mm-hmm. I know we're laughing about this and having a really good time, and a lot of this is funny to us, but I think there was days that we didn't laugh about this.
No, not at all.
Welcome back to the show. Today, I have my co-host with me, the love of my life, my wife,
Hi.
Joanna Ernst. How are you today?
I am doing well. How about you?
Great. You ready for this?
I'm ready. Let's do this.
Awesome. So
All
we're
right.
going to be talking about crossing the line with your spouse when you're in business together.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's get into it.
All right, let's get into this.
So a lot of this really kind of stems from we are married. Mm-hmm. We are in business together.
We started a business 15 years ago.
Right?
So we've
15
been doing
years.
this a long time.
Right? A long time,
Yes.
15 years. We just celebrated our 15-year wedding anniversary.
Yes.
And we've been in business 15 years.
Yes.
Okay. So, but what we talk about is crossing the line.
Yes. Crossing the line when it comes to business and how we treat one another.
I think what this really boils down to is the idea that we kind of eat and breathe and live this business. And pretty soon it becomes very consuming and it can be like a 24/7 thing.
Yeah. A 24/7 conversation all the time.
I know.
Like, all the time. It
Yes,
can be.
I know.
Yeah.
We're over-exaggerating a bit because we
can.
do sleep.
Yes.
Right? We do
but
get some
it's a
sleep.
constant conversation that is going on because it's our life together. It's part of who we are as a couple, but how much that we talk about it and how much we let that envelop into our daily life when we're not in the office, you know, is the conversation, and also the boundaries of that and what that looks like.
No, I get it. So basically, we've lived a lot of years with no boundaries then, is what you're saying.
I don't know if we had no boundaries. I think that we've learned.
No,
like,
you basically said that it's enveloped, so that means no boundaries, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's what we really want to talk about. And this isn't normal. We've talked to other business owners that are couples, and this is a very common thing that happens because this now becomes the thing that we're now looking at in, you know, our daily life because, you know, it is our business. It's both of our works. You know, we spend a lot of time together. We're working through a lot of this stuff. So I can see where this kind of bleeds over into our personal life, and that can't be a very good thing all the time.
No, it's not. And I think, you know, in the early years, what we would do, and we were really good at it, recognizing is that when we started out, I was working in the house and making the calls and doing the cold calling, and you had your set hours. And like, we were able to shut our office doors and come out to the main living area and really just be like, okay, we're no longer going to discuss business today. Like, it's 6 o'clock, it's dinner time. Let's just be us. Let's just enjoy each other's company. Like let's put on a cool movie. You know, like listen to the current events on the news, like talk about those things. But other than that, like that's all that we were going to discuss for the evening.
No, and I get that, but I think that the real issue, and I think what we're really talking about is that, that lasts for a little while.
It does. Yeah.
Right? For a little while. I mean, that sounds a little utopic to me. And
like it was always like that.
Yeah,
No.
that does.
No,
I mean, it's like, that's
yeah.
not, but I know that we spent a lot of time, and I don't think that's what you meant, and maybe that's what you did, but I think that it also really just comes into that fact that you just can't turn it off.
No,
and it's
it is.
always
It's hard.
on your mind. You know, you're not present. I mean, how many times do our dinner conversations or our lunch conversations, or we're having a date night conversation, and somehow we come back to the business or what we're going to be doing or what the next move is. And that can be a very taxing.
Well,
right? It takes a
because
toll.
you might have something that is nagging to you that you want to talk to me about, and I might not be there. Like, I'm wanting, like, let's just say if we're out on a date, like, I'm not at all wanting to discuss your goals that all of a sudden like envelops you for the evening, and you're like, I want to make all this, you know, great, you know, success, and you get really excited about it, and I'm like, that's great, I'm so happy for you, but that's not what I want to talk about right now. Like,
So wait a minute.
Great.
So what you're basically saying is that it's always me.
No,
I'm the one that's
because
always
there's
like
times that,
the
like,
guy
I've
that's
come
talking
to
about
you.
this
No,
all the time.
No. I'm just saying that, like, that's an example. And then, like, there's times that, like, I might come to you and say like, hey, like I'm having this issue in my department and what do you think about this? And you're like, there's no way that I have the brain space to even talk to you about this right now.
I like the word bandwidth.
Yeah, or bandwidth. Yeah, like there's just no way that you even want to discuss that right now because maybe you had a really like hard day or you're all talked out. And you've even told me that, hey, I'm talked out. I don't want to talk about anything right now. And I'm just, well, I haven't seen you all day and there's definitely something I want to bring up. And you're like, well, let's just like table it and like let's talk about it tomorrow when, you know, I'm ready to problem solve with you. So I'm like, okay. And then that's the thing is that like as a couple that I've learned is that I can't pressure you into those conversations because they usually just like end up blowing up because then you just get frustrated. You're just like, dude, I told you I didn't want to talk about this.
Dude, I never get frustrated. Are you kidding me? I
like,
never get frustrated.
I want to talk about it.
No, I'm just like, I'm always like Mr. Cool, calm, collective. I'm like, sure, honey, what do you want to talk about?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm always that guy.
About it. No.
Okay.
I mean, like, I've learned that like you can't force these conversations when the other person's not willing because it is easy. We're home, we're talking, or we're out to lunch and you have that open door because you are my spouse. I know that we have that connection and that love where you're like, but no, I really want to talk about it. And you're like, no. Or I'm the same way, you know, I'm like, no, I don't want to talk about that right now. So it's like, it's having those boundaries and communicating with one another like, hey, like this is not that time right now.
No, I don't disagree. I think we've had to get better at that. And I know we're laughing about this and having a really good time. Yeah. And a lot of this is funny to us, but I think there was days that we didn't laugh about this.
No, not at all.
I think there was an intensity level.
Well, yeah, there is. There's definitely an intensity level to it because of the fact those types of conversations happened. It was truly like where one person's not open to receiving that conversation. It's because that other person did have like an intense day. And that doesn't necessarily mean like you had a bad day or I had a bad day. Maybe it was just intense and like, yeah, you wake up and, you know, you're like, hey, I've had enough. I've talked enough today. I don't want to talk anymore. And that's kind of like how that is. And then we both communicated to one another, but we don't completely shut each other down. We make the time go like, hey, I've got some time tomorrow at 10. Like, let's discuss that tomorrow. Like, hey, I've got a meeting at 8 o'clock, but what's your mid-morning look like? And we've talked about that. We communicated with one another like, hey, this is when we're going to talk about it.
No, and I think it's fair. I think we've talked about it. Yeah. And there was a while that we would talk about it and then we wouldn't execute. We wouldn't follow through.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, we'll talk about it tomorrow at 10 and then something else came up. And I remember many a times you'd be sitting in my office wanting to get this out on the table, or I'd come to your office when we agreed that this was going to be, and then the phone would ring or something would take precedent or somebody would come in and say, hey, we need something. And ultimately, right, or a customer would call, right? There's other aspects of that.
That's one thing. Yeah. So that's one thing that we had to learn is that I've had to come into your office and say like, okay, no distractions. Treat this like any other client meeting that you would have is that we go into one of each other's offices and be like, dude, like I need to talk to you and put your phone on vibrate, put it in another room. We've got to talk. Like we've got to like really just hone this in, discuss these topics that we want to like, you know, either execute, whatever that might be. So,
well, to your point about shutting down the phones, I mean, that's one of the things that we had to spend a lot of time learning how to do at home. So
and we still do.
Well, we still do, right? So when we're having dinner or we're having family time, we physically take our cell phones.
Yeah. And we have to put them in the other room.
Yep, we
and
have
we're
to put
not
them in the
the
other
best
room.
at doing it. But I mean, I think that like it really does take discipline of being like, oh, like I'm not going to be distracted by my phone and it's just sitting on the kitchen counter and we're over here at the dining room and we're eating dinner. But you hear it vibrate, you hear like something ding, and then you go, oh, naturally, after you finish eating, you walk over to it. And then before you know it, you're stuck on some sort of application responding to an email or whatever it might be. So yeah, like literally putting it in the other room to where you don't even hear the notifications go off, where it's not even a distraction or a temptation to want to pick it up.
Well, funny enough, I mean, maybe for you were like really good at, okay, it's in the other room, it's non-existent.
Yeah.
But for me, I mean, openly, I'd be sitting there going, man, is my phone ringing or is there an email happening? Is something going down that I need to pay attention to?
If you really put it from the hours, you know, of let's just call it like 5:30, 6 o'clock to like 8:30 when our daughter goes to bed, those are some really prime time hours where truthfully, in my opinion, like unless it's like a true emergency in business wise, you're good. No one expects you to respond to an email. If they decided to send you an email at like 6 o'clock, that you're going to respond. Within that time frame, it truly isn't like that big of a deal when it comes to business aspect of it.
No, and I don't disagree.
That's why people need to get landlines again. Just like, if it's like family.
With the answering machine that actually, we're
know.
We're totally dating
I know
ourselves,
we're definitely dating
but
ourselves.
regardless, I think that does take some discipline
Mhm.
and you have to be willing to do it. And you also have to shut that part of your brain off. And sometimes it doesn't always shut off. Like I said,
No, it
I wasn't
doesn't.
always the best at it. So I've had to take a lot of time. And I think with your help, and we had to go seek professional help
Mhm.
and work with counseling or whatever it is. And you know what? I'm going to say it. I mean, I'm not perfect. I mean, can you imagine? I'm not perfect. And I get it. My makeup is always thinking about the next thing. But what I think it's done, and we've talked about this, it has caused a lot of issues because the fact that we couldn't shut it down,
Mhm.
or maybe more me shutting it down or you shutting it down. And what happens is that just invades our space.
Mhm.
And we don't really realize how much time that it really takes and what we're missing out on.
Mhm.
And that's something that it's not uncommon that people probably wake up one day and think back and have some level of regret. And, you know, I'm not one of those people that are saying, oh, well, I regret this or I regret that. I mean, past is the past and you deal with it, but I'm a firm believer that you learn
Mhm.
and we don't have to continue doing this. I mean,
Mhm.
your kids, you have kids, we have kids,
Yep.
you know, it's only going to be a certain amount of time, you know, before they grow up. And if you're not paying attention to them,
Mhm.
you know, believe me, they're probably not going to really pay attention to you because
Mhm.
I mean, that's the learned behavior that you're showing, that there's always something else that's more important. And I think it's really important to understand what kind of impact you're having to those around you.
Mhm.
And you and I have had to play that boundary line and that
Mhm.
balance.
Mhm.
I think a lot of this kind of leads us into the next piece. You were talking about, hey, at home, we have set times that this is no work time.
Mhm.
This is family time.
Yep.
But when it comes down to the business, then you should have your business time,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Business hours, right?
Yes.
So that works both ways
Yeah,
too,
it
because
does. It's a two-way street.
I think there's a lot of aspects of it where people find themselves, especially if they have their own businesses,
Mhm.
that,
Bringing home into the business.
well,
Yeah,
right.
you
Or
know?
bringing home into the business.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're supposed to be in your professional mindset.
Mhm.
And it's really easy to blur that boundary line
Yeah.
too. And I've seen that. I've seen that a lot. I've seen that a
Mhm.
lot with you.
Mhm.
I've seen that a lot with me. We're talking about things that are more about our personal life. And I've seen it. I mean, I've been into meetings. We've been with
Mhm.
other clients of ours that are husband and wife business owners. And you do see a lot of that. You
Mhm.
see a lot of their personal life get brought into their business lives. So it works both ways. It's
It
not
does,
just
yeah.
always about, you know, work-life balance isn't just all about your home life, but it's also about your work life. So if you can be massively productive
Mhm.
in the time
Yep.
that you have in during business hours, then you're not going to have to worry about that bleeding over. And also, if you're getting your personal stuff together, right,
Mhm.
which sometimes can be really hard,
Yeah.
and that's balanced out,
Mhm.
then it's not really bleeding into your professional life either.
So that's one thing that we definitely have had to work at day in and day out. And I have to remind myself sometimes that like there might be something that I'm dealing with at home, or like I'm feeling overwhelmed at something in regards to the house or whatever I'm trying to like accomplish for the day. And I'm coming to the office and there's things that like you got to put that hat on and be like, nope, this is what I'm doing right now. This is what I'm going to concentrate on. That can wait. We'll discuss that at a later time, or like I'll tackle that issue or I'll tackle that task at a later time. Like right now, I just need to focus on getting my stuff done here.
But I think it's easy to do as business owners. If you guys are the decision makers, you're the ones running the business,
Mhm.
and who you're really being accountable to yourselves,
Yep.
it's really easy to say, oh, well, you know what? That's okay. Instead of doing this for my business right now, I'm going to go take care of this personal matter.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that you have to be just so rigid,
Mm-mm.
but the less of those, because that can just be some consuming. And I've seen it consume us.
Mhm.
I've seen it consume others, especially if they need to get something done. And if there's other people in the organization on your team that's depending on you and you're having to constantly put them off because you're just taking care of other things, that's a boundary issue too.
Mhm. It is.
So I don't know. I mean, it takes constant work,
It
right?
is.
It's not.
It's a constant work, and it's something that you constantly have to be aware of. And then it's true, like those things do bleed into one another at certain instances of time. I mean, think about the holidays. Like, you know, you've got this to do,
Yes.
you've got that to do.
Yes.
Like we have like double the amount of tasks that are on our calendar. And so it's kind of like finding that balance and being like, okay, like if you say yes to one thing, well, you're saying no to another, you know, well, where's that no? Is that in the business? Is that in the personal aspect of it? So it's just like, it's trying to find that balance of like where that all lies. And then saying like, okay, fine. If I am going to say yes to this, and then maybe that is taking from the business at that moment, how am I going to make that up? You know, so that's where that lies at the same time.
Yeah, so all of that
Mhm.
is extremely stressful. I don't care
Yes.
who you are; it's extremely
It
stressful,
is, yeah.
right? So there's a lot of lot of that going on too,
Yeah.
right? So you're stressed out. I'm stressed out. Yeah, I'll admit it. I have conversations at 3 o'clock in the morning. I just happen to be moving around. I'm not sleeping. And Joanna's like, hey, what's going on? And you know what? I'm just trying to have that conversation in the middle of the night. And it sounds ridiculous, but I bet a lot of people do this, or they're having these conversations because they've got a lot on their mind and they're trying to work through this. So now you're like crossing that boundary line of your sleep and your health because you're just so stressed out and trying to get your thoughts in order or just get your stuff together, right? And I think a lot of it doesn't help, but I think it helps to really have a better idea of when you're going to address your business stuff, right? And you're going to address your personal stuff, right?
Yeah.
And making sure that these things are well thought out and things come up. I totally get that, and they do, but if they're coming up constantly, and we've found ourselves in that route too, in that rut. I meant to say. Right? Where we're constantly dealing with, I call it like putting out fires. And a lot of it's just because we haven't done a really good job of balancing these things out and getting that stuff together. And I think it's something that you have to work at.
Yeah, you definitely have to work at it.
But you have to be able to willing to be vulnerable with one another too.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I mean, you have to like come to your spouse and be vulnerable with them and let them know like, hey, like I'm struggling in this area and I might need your help in a certain like situation or a certain task or project that you're working on, and you just feel like it's all on your shoulders and you just can't do it by yourself. So you have to be honest with one another, like truly honest. And then where I feel like maybe you might be able to help me out in this situation. So that's like where that is at the same time. You have to have that open communication and that understanding with one another. That's what marriage is all about, is just being able to come to one another and be each other's helpers in times like that.
Yeah. And this isn't normal, right? Because not everybody has a business and is married and is a partner in the business together.
Yeah.
So there's all of that you're juggling along with everything else that you're doing. So things change. I mean, everything isn't always going to be the same as it was yesterday or today. And there's different aspects that come up, especially in your personal and business life. I mean, what do you think one of the things that you would say to someone that is, trying to balance this all out and just pulling their hair out or super frustrated? Because I feel like there's a lot of ebb and flow when you're doing all of these things together.
Yeah. When you're doing all those things together and trying to find the balance is just like I said, just talking to one another, trying to figure it out and being honest with one another at the same time. So,
I mean, honesty is key.
Yes,
right?
honesty.
Being able to
Yeah.
be like,
You
be
really have
real.
to be honest with one another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to call each other out.
Yeah. You really do. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
You
There's
really
been
do.
many a times. I think that's one thing I will say that is probably something that I find extremely helpful is being able to be more direct and not talking around things and working through a lot of those processes.
Well, yeah. And then figuring out that being direct with one another, like I see that you get easily distracted, but you can get distracted.
It's okay. You
with
can say it.
I don't want to say you say you easily
Yeah,
because
it's
you're
okay.
a very determined person. But my whole point is that you can get distracted with like projects that may or may not be related to the company. And I can be like, hey, you're kind of spending a little too much time talking about this or figuring this out. And we really have these projects over here in the business that really need more of our attention because you are a type A personality. And so you want everything to be like the way it should be,
So
and
aren't
like,
you a type A personality too?
I am to a certain extent, I think. I think you're more type A than I am. So, yeah. But I mean,
that's always the case. The other person always projects,
Yes.
right? Yeah, that like, I'm the more intense person.
yeah, but you are. So you are definitely like the more intense person in like our relationship than I am. So I think that's also the thing that helps us balance this out is that
Right.
because of the fact that you're a little bit more intense than I am, that I kind of like bring you back down a little bit like, hey, like let's like try to figure this out. Let's get like zeroed in on this where you might just be a little bit more intense on the subject.
No, and I think for a lot of people that are entertaining this idea of going into business together, they're married, they're going into business together, and we just happen to start being married and going into business together.
Literally the same month that like we
Yes.
got married, we immediately started working together.
Nope, absolutely. So for all of the new marriage stuff plus the new business like nuances, right? But that was great. But I think a lot of people start into these things and they're kind of thinking, well, what's this going to be like? Or maybe they're, thinking this is going to be really great. Or maybe they're going to think maybe it's not going to be so great. But I think you guys have to give yourself a little bit of grace.
Yeah, definitely. You're never going to get it perfect. It's never going to be perfect. That's the thing. Like, it's just this constant ebb and flow that like we have gotten in ruts where we're not setting boundaries very well. And that's one thing that like, it's just ebbs and flows. But once you recognize recognize it. You just have to be disciplined enough and aware enough that you are in a situation where that's like not healthy for your marriage, not healthy for the business, and pull yourself back out of it. Okay, these are the actions that we need to do, or like this is the behavior that I maybe, or my mindset that needs to change a little bit, and get right back into it, because like that's what's going to make you successful.
I couldn't agree more.
Yes.
Well, thank you for listening today. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you found this episode helpful, share it and subscribe. You can find us on YouTube at HeyCharlesBiz and on Instagram and TikTok at HeyCharles77. See you next time.
See you next time.